Good afternoon and welcome to Lunch Break with the Rabbi. Today is Thursday, July 1st, and it is July 1st, 2021. It is the 21st day of the month of Tammuz, and we approach closer to the Shabbos, which is going to be this week, Shabbos Mevarchim, which we bless the month of Menachem Av. It is a month which is in its name. It talks about comforting, as we know, as in this month it has the saddest day of the Jewish calendar, the saddest day of the year, Tisha B'Av, and we ask of God to comfort us, as we know that this day is also an opportune time for the coming of Mashiach as well. So as we approach this month, we talk about what's going to be in this week's Torah reading. Every child you ask will tell you, what is the Torah? Who gave the Torah? Who is the greatest authority on the Torah? Torah tziva lanu Moshe me'Rosh Kehilas Yaakov. The Torah that has been given to us from God through Moshe on Mount Sinai. So if there was one singular individual that would be able to tell you an authority or a law, the best person to ask probably would be Moses. But over here in this week's Torah reading, as we mentioned a little bit of it yesterday, there were two episodes where Moshe seemingly forgot or did not know how to rule in the Torah. And the first case was when Cosby, the leader of the tribe of Shimon, was taking a Midianite woman. Zimri took the woman Cosby, and he kept on parading around with her and what the law and how should be acted in with such a situation in this individual, until Pinchas stood up and took the matter into his own hands. And then when Pinchas took the matter into his own hands, again, what should be dealt? Was Pinchas correct or incorrect? That in itself was up for debate. And then we find a little bit later, as we read a few days ago, as we spoke about yesterday, the story of the daughters of Tzalafchad, where they approached Moshe and asked for a parcel of land in Israel, even though their father was no longer alive, they had no brothers. And again, Moshe was concealed from him what that law was. How is it possible that in these two ideas, and we actually find it in one other place as well, but in these two unique qualities of ideas, where Moshe, who's the leader and the teacher of all people, Moshe Rabbeinu, our teacher, does not have the proper law or does not know the law to give it to the people? And the answer is because in both of these cases, there was some type of connection, bias that Moshe had. And the bias in this case was because the bias did not allow him to see the purview, to see the idea clearly. And the moment we have a certain bias into a certain element of something, we automatically, our vision and our opinion of something becomes clouded, that we don't have the ability to be able to understand and explain what is going on. And many times, many people think, you know what, I can avoid that personal bias. I am above that biasness. But the Talmud tells us something very interesting. You know, when the Sanhedrin, the great assembly of greatest judges and rabbis, would convene to decide if they should make a leap year or not, they would invite all the rabbis to hear everybody's opinion and to hear what was going on. But there was two people that they didn't invite to hear their opinion: the king and the high priest and the Kohen Gadol. And the Talmud explains why was the king and the high priest not invited to convene and to decide if they should be a leap year. Seemingly they're the two greatest individuals, the greatest minds as well. Why shouldn't we ask them? Because both of them have a personal bias. The king is looking forward to having a 13-month year, because since he pays his soldiers only annually, he will then be able to pay them for 13 months while only paying them for an annual salary and gets a free month included. The Kohen Gadol has a personal bias, the high priest, because if there's a 13th year, he wants the opposite. He wants only a 12-month year. Because if there's a 13-month year, that means Yom Kippur comes out closer into October, which is then a little colder. That means that he has to go into the mikveh 5 times on Yom Kippur. That mikveh is going to be cold. While it's earlier, if it's in the summer, then it's going to be warmer. So each one of them, even though they seemingly look like a very little objective, a little subjectiveness in the idea, the concept is that we are all subjective and have a personal bias when it comes to a certain idea. And when there's a personal bias, we cannot be the judge or the prosecutor or defense attorney because we have a personal bias. So too Moshe in our case had a personal bias, Because Moshe, in the case of Pinchas, what was Zimri going around saying, the leader of the tribe of Shimon, saying, look, Moshe took a woman from Midian, so can I. He was using Moshe as a model, defaming and trying to degrade Moshe. Moshe, in all circumstances, would stand up for Pinchas because that's his personal bias. Same idea in this case of the daughters of Tzalafchad. The daughters of Tzalafchad said, our father was not part of the faction of Korach, already stating a certain personal bias towards Moses, because Korach stood up to make a coup against Moses, saying my father was not part of them. So even though there was even a slight or a sniff of a biasness, the Torah alludes to the fact that God made sure that Moshe should not have to rule or come to a circumstance where he has to be able to be subjective because of the personal bias that was there. There's an interesting story told about one of the commentators on Jewish law known as the Sameh. He was called the Sameh because he wrote the Sefer Me'irei Seinayim, Enlightening the Eyes. And when he published his commentary on the Code of Jewish Law, he went to a certain publishing fellow, a certain printer to publish it, to print his books. And there was some type of conflict between the two of them, between the publisher versus the Sameh, the author. And the publisher argued in saying that I can't go to any rabbi in this area because they all know you as an halachic authority and they will all be afraid to rule against you. And therefore, we need to go to a rabbinical court out of town to be able to adjudicate our case because there should not be any personal bias. The Sameh agreed, and they went to a rabbi in Hungary, a very great Bezdin rabbinical court in Hungary outside of Poland where they lived. And when they came to that rabbi ruled in favor of the publisher of the printer. The publisher and the rabbi, the Sameh, looked at the rabbi and said, on what basis have you found me guilty that I lose? What basis am I guilty of? Seemingly the law's on my side. So the rabbi turns to him and says, you may be right. However, there was recently a book came out in Poland by a fellow by the name of Me'irei Seinayim. I don't know who he is, but he makes a very valid case why in this case you should be guilty and the publisher should be the winner. That means the rabbi quoted from this own rabbi's book. The Sameh, upon hearing this, says, that's how bad a personal bias is. That even your own instance, you forget what you wrote yourself and how you ruled and what you wrote in your own book, only to be able to cover your own self. Because of that, the Mishnah tells us, Rabbi Yeshua ben Prachia tells us, Asei l'charav, one of the most important objectives in the way a person can be objective, if they always consult with a rabbi. They always consult with a third party. Never make decisions on your own, deciding and saying, this is the way it has to be and that's the way it should be. Because we are always subjective. We always have a personal bias into every situation. There is no such thing that I'm completely objective. And the only way you can get a true and real answer about a certain circumstance or situation in your life is to ask a third party, is to ask a rabbi, to ask somebody who's completely objective and has nothing to do with the story at hand. This is the Torah telling us that when Moshe was concealed, that he wasn't able to teach the two Jewish people and tell the law to the daughters of Tzalafchad, or by the incident of Pinchas, was to teach us that all of us have a personal bias. Never judge another person in your purview, because again, you are subjective. Remember, Asei l'charav, ask a rabbi, ask another authority, ask a friend, speak to somebody who's completely objective, who has no personal bias in the situation, and only then will you have a clear answer. My dear friends, I'd like to take this opportunity and wish you all a wonderful Shabbos and a great week ahead. Looking forward to joining you again next week, celebrating and speaking Lunch Break with the Rabbi. Enjoy your Shabbos. Enjoy this time with this country, the Independence Day of this country of July 4th, a Medina Shel Chesed, a country of kindness. Let us all be kind to one another, think about each other, help each other, and bring Mashiach. Have a wonderful day.